Hey everybody, today we're talking about Ultimate Spider-Man Volume 1, Power and Responsibility. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we're talking about Ultimate Spider-Man. Yes, I have all the Ultimate Spider-Man trades. We're going to read all of them slowly, but at this rate, I think we're going to be done fairly quickly. Like, A, they're pretty good, they're wonderful, and B, they're short reads, even though Bendis has a lot of dialogue and word balloons and things like that. It's great. The first 111 issues are all done by Mark Bagley, and him and Bendis as a team together broke the Marvel, I think it was the comics record, not just Marvel comics record, of Jack Kirby and Stan Lee on the original Fantastic Four. I believe they did like 110 issues, and Bagley just wanted to, one-up it, I guess. So they lined it up to do 111. I believe that's the story. I don't know. I haven't looked it up, but I think that's the story. Either they did like 102 or 105, Stan and Jack, but Bendis and Bagley did 111 continuous issues of Ultimate Spider-Man. No breaks, nothing, no fill-ins, anything at all. It's all Bagley all the time, and it's all phenomenal. Now, some of you may say, Brent, Mark Bagley's not that great an artist. To you, I say, phi. That is wrong. He's definitely finding his feet a little bit here in Ultimate Spider-Man of like what the feel of the book is. Like, this volume reads, compared to later ones, like just finished volume 3 yesterday, and compared to later volumes, this one does feel a little bit different. It's a little bit more densely packed, and maybe that's also Bendis as well. But like the storytelling just gets a little bit better, even though Bagley at that point in time had done many issues of Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man in the 90s on the Clone Saga and Carnage, Maximum Carnage. Like, he's been on Spider-Man a long time. So for this to come out in 2003 or 1, when did this come out? I think it was 2001. This version is the 6th printing from 2005. But yeah, this is the starting line of modern comics to me. Like, anything from 2000 and on, I feel like you can read today, no problems, because it's all, a lot of the writers are still around, a lot of the artists are still around. Some 90s stuff I feel like you can read, like the Batman stuff's pretty good. You can read that past then. But some of the 90s X-Men and Marvel comics just aren't that great. But here, with the start of Ultimate Spider-Man, like, if you mark Ultimate Spider-Man as your starting guide and go forward, I feel like you could pretty much read anything at this point in time. And probably going forward, this is classic stuff. I'm not sure if storytelling will evolve much past what this is and what comics have been since this came out, if you know what I mean. Less thought balloons, more narrative captions, the pacing, knowing how many panels per page, that kind of stuff, and the modern coloring. Like, computerized coloring had been around since the 90s when Spawn was doing it. He came out, and McFarlane was doing computerized coloring at Image for a long time. But it wasn't until like the mid-90s, I think, Marvel switched over. But here, they've definitely like mastered their craft here. So you have Art Thibert doing the inks and the colors. You have Steve Buccellato, Marie Jarvin's color graphics, Transparency Digital doing the colors, and they're good. They're really good. It doesn't feel like the early 90s computer coloring in some older books, older than this actually. So this being 23 years old is kind of surprising to see how well this reads. It's really good. So this contains the first 7 issues of Ultimate Spider-Man, and this is basically like, this is also the time when decompression started. What is decompression, Brent? Well, you had a time in the 70s, 80s, 90s where you had stories that were one and done, one issue, in and out. You had multiple storylines that were 2 issues, 3 issues, 4, 5, 6, 8, 10. It all varied, depends on what happened. But with Ultimate Spider-Man, you really had the invigoration of the book market. So Marvel and DC wanted to collect their comics in these trade paperbacks. So you had them finding a way to, what's the best price point for these books? Well, 5 or 6 issues for how much money? At the time, this is what was a $15 book in 2005. Now you're probably getting 6 issues for 20. Bigger books, 12-issue books, you're getting for like $35, $40 now. So it's just making that price point where a book is affordable and you can get a good chunk of reading out of it. And so basically they said all trades are going to be 5 to 6 issues. So this is what writing for the trade came from. So you had these regular storylines where like the Spider-Man's origin is 1 issue. I think in Amazing Fantasy 15. And here it's told over 7 issues. However, Brian Michael Bendis does throw in the first encounter of the Green Goblin, but Spidey doesn't really put on a suit until issue 4. You know what I mean? Like his blue and red, and then he adds the webs later on, which is pretty interesting. But it's all in here. Peter's got ties to Norman Osborn. The interesting thing here is they say where that radioactive spider came from. It comes from Oscorp. That's very similar to the film. I can't remember if the Raimi film came out before or after this. I feel like it came out after. I could be wrong, so don't quote me on it. But it was about the same time, so they're echoing each other. You know what I mean? But this is taking Spider-Man back to basics. Peter as a high school student, not married, no entanglements, learning how to be a superhero, his origin story going forward all the way through. That was the conceit of the Ultimate Universe, was a new start. A new start for the X-Men, a new start for Spider-Man, a new start for the Avengers, and where do they go from there in the modern, at that time, the modern storytelling age, right? So Uncle Ben here is cool. He's not this stuffy Uncle Ben. He's got a ponytail, which in the 2000s, if you were a man and you were old and you had a ponytail, you were an old hippie, and therefore you might have been really cool, or maybe just like a Apocalypse Now survivor, conspiracy theorist at the time, but this Uncle Ben is cool. Harry is not really Peter's best friend in this book. Like, he's around. He's kind of the popular rich kid in school, so he's using Peter to do his homework and things like that. But he's not the jerk to Peter that the other characters like Flash Thompson here with the bowl cut, and this new character Kong, which is the big bald guy. They're the big bullies to Peter. They're kind of like Bulk and Skull of the Ultimate Spider-Man. If you watch Power Rangers, the original one, you know what I'm talking about. They're those characters. Then you have Mary Jane, you have Liz, and some other cheerleaders like in the background in the first 7 issues. But there's so many wonderful moments in here of just taking the time to tell the origin spaciously, not properly, but spaciously. And you find moments that you may not have found in that original book. That also, the same way they got fleshed out in the movie. Here's another Flash Thompson punching Peter, him catching it after he got bit, realizing that he broke Flash's hand. And in the modern age, you have time to tell that story of like what happens when you break your hand at school from another kid. Well, the other kids get mad. The other kids' parents get mad and they threaten to sue. And you have Ben and May on the next page like freaking out because of this looming hospital bill and things like that. At the same time, you also have Osborn like figuring out where his spider went and who got bit. So there's a little bit of intrigue there as he's tracking Peter, trying to figure out what's wrong with him. You still have Peter fighting in a wrestling match. You still have the guy getting robbed and Peter not stopping him. And you have the death of Uncle Ben and Peter kind of going after him all of a sudden. So it does echo the Raimi film a lot, but in a more modern way where the Raimi film felt very retro and modern at the same time. So if you've seen the Raimi film, you could still read this and get a fresh take, although a lot of elements are very similar. I don't know if they're echoes of each other or if this did come out beforehand, because the Raimi film was in 2002. Maybe this was around for them to work off of on that script, on the idea. The Green Goblin design is very different. Don't know if I'm a fan. But Goblin here is like, so a lot of the Ultimate twists, they twist the origins of the characters a little bit. So instead of Goblin being a guy on a mask and taking a serum that makes him crazy, this one turns into this hulking green beast kind of thing where he's just focused on one thing, finding Parker. He doesn't really know why. But he's wearing purple cloak. There's no glider. He just jumps really far right now. So that's a little bit of a different thing that Ultimate Spider-Man is going to continue to do as we read through these volumes, is tell different versions of the villains. Some things you may recognize, some things are brand new, but ultimately, it's a great take on Spider-Man, and I can't wait to read it. I've only read, I think I read the first, in 2001 on the World Wide Web, maybe this was 2002. Marvel did have a lot of like their whole Ultimate line, and at the same time, the Nuff Said stuff was coming out. There was like a whole digital comics thing online on a web browser at the time, where you could read full series. Ultimate Spider-Man was one of them. Ultimate X-Men was one of them. So I read a majority of that at the time in single issue there. I remember reading Ultimate Daredevil and Elektra. I remember reading Greg Rucka's Elektra, the Nuff Said issues, and some of them were like onesie-twosies kind of things. But I do distinctly remember checking this website often to read the next issue of Ultimate Spider-Man and Ultimate X-Men. Collected editions, I think I started with 4, which we'll get to, and then I had 6, which is the Venom also arc. 4 is Return of Green Goblin. I'm looking over there. And then I had the 9, which is the Ultimate 6 arc, Secrets, or the Sinister 6. And then I think I skipped some. And then I had the Clone Saga, and that was about it. So I haven't read everything in Ultimate Spider-Man up until the very end. I've read most of it, but most of it I've read once. So a lot of this is going to come really, really fresh to me over the last 23 years. So that's going to be an exciting read. So if you like Ultimate Spider-Man, jump in with us. Get an omnibus, follow along every couple issues or so. Stop and wait for the next video or whatever you want to do. But I thought this would be fun to reread Ultimate Spider-Man before Hickman and Cicchetto's book comes out that relaunches the Ultimate Universe. That's coming, I think, this month or next month also. So yeah, I really enjoyed this, honestly. It's good. It's good. It's a fresh take. If you haven't read this before, please go check it out. We'll see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.